so now I'm going to show you how to actually do a calibration. So the first thing you'll notice is we now have our flow meter installed into the pipe in our 1-inch line in a 1-inch T-fitting. For the purposes of this demonstration, we do not have our valve installed into the pipe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into manual mode. I'm then going to open this valve. Typically that valve would be mounted upstream of this flow meter. So when I open that valve in manual mode, it will allow us to flow past the flow meter so we can do our calibration. But again, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to show you the valve opening on the table. We have a manual hand valve here that allows us to flow past the flow meter. We also have a 5-gallon bucket, which is what we're going to fill up. So once we fill 5 gallons up, that'll be equivalent to 2 of your 2.5-gallon jugs. And then I will show you how we go about calculating the math and the K factor that we need to program into the display. One other thing to mention, the valve comes with glue-in fittings and threaded-in fittings. So no matter which you prefer to use, you'll have both options. And unlike our hardwired systems, with this one being a newer system, it will always come with the same display, the same power supply, the same valve, so you'll never have multiple components that you need to be worried about. Now, the last thing we need to do before we come into do a calibration is press number 3, go into setup, hit enter, password is 111, hit enter again, and I need my K factor to be set to 1. So what I'm going to be doing here is counting pulses every time that paddle wheel spins. Thing I'm going to do first, so I'm going to escape out of here, go into manual mode, I'm going to open my valve. So again, now if that valve were installed in this line, it would be open, we'd be ready to flow. So if I come up here, I'm going to turn my pump on, open my hand valve, and we're now filling our 5-gallon jug. All right, now our 5-gallon bucket's full. I turned my hand valve off, turning my pump off. Now we should be done totalizing. Come back over to the display, and we're showing a total of 1,220 gallons on the display. But since our K factor is set to 1, that's actually raw pulses. So since I have a 5-gallon bucket, I simply take 1,220, I divide it by 5, and that will give me my K factor. That comes out to 244. So I need to hit number 2, that closes my valve. Hit the escape button to get back to the main menu. Hit number 3 to go into setup. Hit enter. Type in my password of 111. And now I can change my K factor to 244. Hit. 244. Hit enter. Now our K factor is programmed in. This meter should be calibrated. So if I back out, go into manual, it shows me that I've flowed exactly 5 gallons, which is the size of my bucket. So I would personally suggest that anytime you do this, you do it 3 times. So in the case of a pool store, you're going to fill 3 different 2.5-gallon jugs. Take the average across those 3. The calibration that we've just done is on water. You're going to be doing bleach or sodium hypochlorite. Has a slightly different specific gravity. So you always need to do the calibration on whatever process you are flowing through your meter. That's it for a calibration. The next step will be showing you how to troubleshoot these flow meters. Okay, now we're going to troubleshoot the flow meter system. So I'm going to start by testing the paddle wheel. Excuse me, I should say I'm going to start by testing the pulses from the paddle wheel to the display. So right now I have my paddle wheel out of the line. If I give the paddle a spin with my finger, I should see it totalizing here. What that's going to tell me is that I'm both outputting a pulse from the flow meter, and the display is seeing the pulses coming into it via the wire. So if I give it a spin, you can see the totalization happening right there. So that's great. I know my flow meter is outputting pulses, and I know that my display is receiving pulses. So if I hit F2, I can reset that back to 0. Now the next thing that we want to test is the power supply. So what we want to do here is, again, we have my power cable plugged in. So I've got 120 volts coming into the power supply. Coming out of the power supply is 24 volts DC. Those wires land on terminals 1 and 2 up here. So I have my voltmeter on DC volts. So if I come up here and go across 1 and 2, excuse me, I had those reversed, you will see 24.3 volts DC. You want that to be anywhere from 24 to 30 volts DC. So I know my power supply is outputting proper power. The next step would be to take the red wire from my flow meter and take it off of terminal 15. Then I want to take the lead from my multimeter, stick it into terminal 15, take the other lead, put it on my red wire for the flow meter, and then if I give my paddle a spin, every time it spins, you should see that voltmeter jump up in voltage. Again, that is seeing a pulse every time one of these paddles passes by the sensor body. And as long as you're doing that, you know the flow meter is outputting pulses properly. So the last thing that you can do for troubleshooting is if I take either a paper clip, or in this case, I have a jumper wire, and if I take one end of my jumper wire, put it on terminal 2, and the other end of my jumper wire and tap on terminal 15, that is the same thing as creating pulses. I'm simulating pulses by doing this. So if I then come and look at my display, you can see that I've totalized. I'm up to 2.5 gallons. So again, that's testing the inputs on the display. So everything is functioning properly, just as we would expect. The only other thing you could ever need to test or to troubleshoot would be the valve itself. So if we come over here to the valve, so I'm going to unplug the valve now and show you how to manually operate the valve when you take power off. All right, so now power is killed to the unit. The valve is in the closed position. If I take my tool, insert it right here, I can then twist, and as I'm doing that, you can see that position indicator moving. So I can move it all the way to the open position. And there we have, now your valve is open. So alternatively, I can do the same thing, go the opposite direction, and I can close my valve. And we're almost there. Now we are in the closed position. All right. So again, if you ever need to manually actuate the valve, shut off power, use your tool, open or close that valve, and you can flow bleach as needed. Again, if you ever have any issues with the valve going to the proper position in the batch formatting, give us a call at Gilson Engineering. The phone number is 1-800-860-4499. Ask for the applications group, and we will take care of any other issues that you may have, or get one of our salesmen out to your location to take a look. That covers everything for our automated bleach meter system. I appreciate your time and look forward to serving you in the field.